Good evening, everyone. We're kind of few in number tonight. Usually we have a lot more, don't we? So something must be going on. I don't know what. Anyway, I'm sure you all know who I am by now, because I recognize most of you. So again, my name is Rhoda Kohne, and I take care of health ministries here at the Greenville Seventh-day Adventist Church. Just so you know where the restrooms are, if you exit the doors and turn to your right, you'll find the restrooms down that hallway. I hope that you signed in so that you can get emails to the upcoming events. You picked up a recipe sheet when you came in, or it was handed to you. Because of COVID-19, we don't eat together, unfortunately, but we will send home a lunch with you tonight, again, after the end of the program. So it'll be where you registered. You can just pick up your lunch there, okay? Are there any questions about the recipe or the recipes? It's pretty straightforward. I think if you've been to Diabetes Undone, you've probably had both of these recipes. But anyway, no questions on the recipes? Okay, let's go on then. Also in your hand, you got another postcard for the next dinner with the doctor, and that one is going to be in January. We have them once a quarter. And this next one will be on immunity, how to achieve optimal immunity. If you're familiar with Walt Cross, he is a lifestyle educator. He has a store in mustard seed, and he goes all over the world teaching people on subjects like how to gain optimal immunity naturally, as well as many other things. And he will be accompanied by my husband, Dr. Kohne, and together they will present that lecture, and I think it will be extremely interesting. So pick up extra cards to give to your friends, if you like. So that's January. In fact, let me just say this. We had planned on doing a program similar to this back in March when we all got locked down. So it never happened. But I think we're learning from this COVID-19 pandemic that immunity is essential to staying well and staying healthy. So I hope to see you all next time with a friend. So tonight you're here to learn about women's health, and our speaker will look at the advances of breast imaging, your role in early identification, and what you can do to foster good breast health. I looked on the cancer.org website and discovered the following. Breast cancer is the most common cancer in American women, except for skin cancers. Currently, the average risk of a woman in the United States developing breast cancer sometime in her life is about 13%. This means there is a 1 in 8 chance she will develop breast cancer. This also means there is 7 in 8 chance she will never have the disease. And I hope we are all in that group, the 7 in 8 chance. And most of you here are mothers, I'm sure, right? At some point, you were all a young mother and had children that you would cradle in your arms and hold them close to your bosom. The Bible paints a similar picture to illustrate the tenderness of Jesus toward humanity. In Isaiah 40:11, Jesus is depicted as a shepherd. The Bible says, "He shall feed his flock like a shepherd. He shall gather the lambs with his arm and carry them in his bosom, and shall gently lead those that are with young." And then in the New Testament, we again see the tenderness of Jesus, this time in search of one lost sheep. Luke 15:5-6 says, "And when he hath found it," that being the sheep, "he layeth it on his shoulders, rejoicing. And when he cometh home, he calleth together his friends and neighbors, saying unto them, Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep which was lost." The shepherd's life of diligence and caretaking and his tender compassion for the helpless creatures entrusted to his charge have been employed by the inspired writers to illustrate some of the most precious truths of the gospel. Christ, in his relation to his people, is compared to a shepherd. After the fall, he saw his sheep doomed to perish in the dark ways of sin. To save these wandering ones, he left the honors and glories of his Father's house. He says, "I will seek that which was lost and bring again that which was driven away, and will bind up that which was broken, and will strengthen that which was sick. I will save my flock, and they shall no more be a prey, neither shall the beasts of the land devour them." Those verses were all taken from Ezekiel 34. His voice is heard calling them to his fold, a shadow in the daytime from the heat and a place of refuge, and for a covert from storm and from rain. That's from Isaiah 4:6. His care for the flock is unwearied. He strengthens the weak, relieves the suffering, gathers the lambs in his arms, and carries them in his bosom. His sheep love him. I wanted to remind you tonight that no matter what trial or difficulty you may be facing, you have a good shepherd, and that is Jesus. He carries you against his bosom. There is no safer place to be. And with a shepherd like that, who cannot love him? Let's bow our heads for prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we come before you with thankfulness in our hearts as we are reminded of the loving and tenderness that Jesus has toward us, his sheep, and that he holds us close to his breast and comforts us, guides us, covers us as our needs demand. And as we are here tonight to learn about women's health, I just pray that your Holy Spirit will be here as well, and that you will be with our speaker tonight. Thank you for bringing each one here. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. So I'd like to introduce our speaker. This is Dr. Raymond Kohne. Some of you may be familiar with him. He is an interventional radiologist. He completed medical school at Loma Linda University in Loma Linda, California, and completed his residency and fellowship there as well. Dr. Kohne worked at Tacoma Hospital for 21 years as chief of diagnostic and interventional radiology. Currently, he's working in the same capacity at State of Franklin Healthcare Associates in Johnson City. So we want to welcome him tonight, and we look forward to your presentation. After his presentation, we will have a question and answer time. And if you would, please come to the mic because it's being recorded, and we would like to hear your question as well as his answer. Okay, Dr. Kohne.
Thank you, Rhoda. It's great to be here. I've been in this sanctuary for a while, but it has many special memories. My eldest was baptized right here and gave her heart to Jesus, and she's now at Loma Linda, fourth-year medical student, ready to graduate, and hopefully we'll move back to Tennessee one day when she's done. So anyway, many warm memories here. Today we're going to deal with the essentials of what you need to know for women's imaging, and it's not straightforward, and it's always changing. You know, it's just like computers and iPhones and whatever. Things are constantly changing. Nothing's static. The only thing static in life is change. And so we're just going to give you a little bit of an update, and hopefully we can go from there. So what do you really need to know? I like this one. It's like the mammogram. Everyone makes fun of it. Yes, I did have my mammogram today. Why do you ask? Unfortunately, that's the sensation, or at least opinion a lot of women have regarding the mammogram, that it's a terrible torture chamber where we can compress your breasts and not make you happy campers to look for something you don't want to know about anyway. But, you know, when and who actually needs a mammogram? Does everyone need a mammogram? What about breast density? You'll see that is coming up more and more as you get these letters, and we'll discuss that. What about 3D mammography versus the regular 2D mammography? And there's a new technology which most of you probably haven't heard of called ABUS. And it's not one of these yellow things that go down the road in the morning. Actually, they're not doing that anymore anyway. It's called automated breast ultrasound, which is an amazing new technology that helps us detect cancers in dense breasts. And we'll cover those areas. Back to the flattened breasts. We now have curved paddles, for those of you who don't know. And they improve the comfort significantly. I had someone from Greenville come up there and get their mammogram, and they go, "Ray, you've been doing this for 20 years. What's different? It didn't hurt this time." And so I'm happy to announce that we have curved paddles. We were the first in East Tennessee to get them. I like to stay ahead of the edge and keep ahead of the competition. So anyway, it does improve comfort significantly. They say 41% more women are willing to come get their mammograms because that pain and flattening sensation can at least be alleviated somewhat. It's not totally reduced, but it's significant enough to where people actually notice a difference. And I've had patients actually tell me that, which I think is kind of neat. So we have that up at SOFA. So breast cancer, that's the one we're all worried about. Who gets it? Why should I worry, or should I even worry? Well, like Rhoda was saying, we got 1 in 8 chance of any woman to acquire breast cancer, something you don't want to get. Those numbers are actually getting worse, not better, over time. But that's the one that's most frequently quoted. So who gets breast cancer? Are some women at greater risk for breast cancer than others? If so, what are the risk factors? If I don't have any risk factors, should I even worry about it? And can we calculate the risk? How many of you have heard of BRCA genes, BRCA1 and 2? Put your hands up. Okay, so BRCA1 and 2, BRCA1 is a gene that we discovered in 1990, and BRCA2 in 1994. It's a gene that encodes proteins that helps fix DNA breaks. If you have a faulty copy of this BRCA gene, your DNA is not repaired, and it increases your risk of cancer, breast cancer being one of those. That goes for both BRCA1 and 2. And there's about 20 other genes that we're aware of, but these are the most common ones that we see. The most famous person to have this is Angelina Jolie. She opted for bilateral mastectomy because your chance of breast cancer with this is up to 80%. So she decided for a bilateral mastectomy, and she had both her ovaries removed. What surprised me was a few years later, Brad Pitt left her. Don't know what that means. So what are your lifetime risks if you have one of these BRCA alleles? 60 to 80% chance of getting breast cancer, which is pretty high. And there's something you can do about it. A second primary breast cancer, 50%. Ovarian cancer, 10 to 45%. Gets pretty high. So how many breast cancers are actually attributed to this gene? Surprisingly, only a small amount. That blue triangle is all that's going to be associated with that gene. Matter of fact, the red triangle is family clusters. So people who come to me and all the time say, well, I don't have a family history. It really doesn't matter. 75% of breast cancers are de novo, no family history. You're not out of the woods. If you do have a family history, that increases your risk to above the 1 in 8. But if you don't have a family history, you're not out of the woods. Okay? 75% of the breast cancers out there are de novo, no family history. So what are the risk factors? We have non-modifiable risk factors, and luckily we have some modifiable risk factors. So a non-modifiable risk factor is gender, being a woman. That's the #1 risk of getting breast cancer, is being a female. Okay? Not much you can do about it, although a lot of people are trying these days, but frankly, you really can't do anything about it. And it was funny because I was at a lecture that was put on by University of San Francisco, go figure, and they were having a 1-hour lecture on transgenders. No kidding. The people who are girls and become boys don't want mammograms anymore, but they need them. The boys who become girls want the mammograms, but they don't need them. So, interesting dilemma to have as a radiologist. Body weight, something that's modifiable. If you can keep a normal body weight, that reduces your risk of breast cancer, and I think other cancers as well. Age is the second greatest risk. As one gets older, the risk of breast cancer increases. Increase of any cancer increases with age. Okay? Physical activity can at least help reduce that. Family history, that increases your risk of breast cancer, but remember, you're not out of the woods if you don't have family history. So alcohol use or diet. And I think it's a good time to put in a little pitch for a plant-based whole food diet. Even with the BRCA gene, there was a study that showed that you have an 80% increased risk of breast cancer if you have one of these BRCA genes. If you become a vegan, you can actually reduce that risk by 73%. Huge. Puts you back in the normal range, okay? Does that mean you could still get breast cancer? Yes, but it reduces your risk significantly. Now, vegan, I don't like the term vegan because technically you could eat pretzels and beer and be a vegan. The whole point is whole food, plant-based diet. If it's in a box, don't eat it. If God made it, have at it. And just make sure it's organic and not full of pesticides. Watch it off. But that's really the key to a lot of these cancers. I thought that was astonishing to think that you could almost get back to normal with the BRCA gene. So Angelina Jolie, all she had to do is become a vegan. She'd have done a whole lot better, but no one told her that. Breast density is actually a huge factor. We're finding out every year more and more. Dense breast tissue increases your risk for breast cancer. And we'll go over that in detail. Smoking increases your risk for breast cancer. Okay? Breast conditions, adenosis, fibrocystic changes can increase your risk. Taking hormones is something you can adjust, but again, that's something you need to discuss with your physician. Going nuts and having hot flashes and trying to pull your hair out is probably not a good thing. So you need to balance that out, but it is a risk factor, and in some studies I've seen a small amount of hormonal replacement therapies actually reduces your risk of breast cancer. Something you need to talk about with your physician. Any personal cancer history, okay? Pregnancy less than 20 or greater than 30 increases your risk, okay? Age of menarche, you can't change that, less than 12 or greater than 55. Now, have you ever noticed how many of women's problems begin with men? Mental illness, menstrual cramps, mental breakdown, menopause, gynecologist, sorry, Harry. And radiation therapy is one of the risk factors that you can reduce, but usually if you're getting that, it's not something that's really modifiable. I don't know anyone here who goes and gets mantle radiation for just the heck of it. So can we calculate breast cancer risk? Yes, we can. There's multiple models out there that will actually help calculate your risk as far as breast cancer is concerned. And most facilities offer those calculators now to where you can go in and at least have an idea what really is my risk as far as breast cancer is concerned. So we can calculate this. What's been problematic in the past is the media. I guess Trump says it best, fake news. There's all sorts of deceit out in the environment today with the media, and you really can't understand why they're doing it. Medicine, in many cases, has been hijacked now for political purposes, and it's devastating to see that. And you'll see the same thing with women's imaging. A new task force has come up with a new breast cancer screening recommendation for women in their 40s. Don't worry your pretty little heads about it. So here's your new guidelines. They advise against mammograms, self-exams, doctor's exams to prevent needless anxiety due to false positives. False positives, by the way, are getting much slower with the technologies that we have, and it does save your life. So that's the problem, is the misinformation and disinformation that is out there. For us as Adventists, it really shouldn't be surprising because we know who the king of the airways is, and we know who is running this earth at this point. And it's not the good guy. He's coming, hopefully very soon, with what's going on in this country. But this whole country is just filled with division and deceit, which are, in my opinion, just Satan's fingerprints. And so you kind of have to do your homework. You have to figure out what's really going on, and it's not always that easy. So the new mammogram guidelines can heighten breast cancer confusion, and that's why all these different guys come up with all these different recommendations, and so we're going to kind of go over them. The screening recommendations for the Society of Breast Imaging and the American College of Radiology is pretty simple. Annual mammographic screening from age 40, women at increased risk with BRCA mutations or any other mutations annually starting at age 30, because those women tend to get it earlier and it tends to be more aggressive. Women with histories of mantle irradiation beginning 8 years after radiation but not before age 25. Women with mothers or sisters with premenopausal breast cancer beginning at age 30 but not before 25, or 10 years earlier than the age of the diagnosis of the youngest effective relative. So the bottom line is, if mom had breast cancer at 42 and she was premenopausal, you might want to consider your screening at age 32, okay? So that's kind of how that works. So a few years ago, they came out with all sorts of different guidelines, and this one is from the American Cancer Society. And I kind of like them because at age 40, it says at least talk to your doctor about beginning to screen, okay? At age 45, okay, it says you have to begin yearly mammograms, and you have to continue that till at least menopause or 55. After that, you can have regular mammograms, or as long as you're in good health. So this is a little video put on by the American Cancer Society that I felt was actually done well and explains what's going on. So we'll let you watch that. Let's go back to that. Oh, that's interesting. It's jammed up. All right, my computer's jammed up. I may have to restart here. And Brad and I went through all the trouble of testing this, and it worked. We're just going to restart. Computers have a mind of their own. Yeah, well, it's booting up. I thought it was fascinating that a whole food plant-based diet could reduce your risk that much. And I think you're going to find the same thing with the COVID when you go to the immunity lecture in January. You're going to find out that if God made it, it's a great thing. That's a little bit of a problem for me because I really like leanies and I like grillers, and they're not. They come in a box, unfortunately. There we go. All right, let's try this again here. Hopefully it'll do what it's supposed to do. And we'll just run ahead to this slide here and play it.
Since the new breast cancer screening guidelines have come out, quite a few people have asked us, what's the science and the numbers behind the guideline? So let's take a look at that together. The first thing to remember is that mammography is equally effective in virtually all age groups. It reduces mortality by at least 20% in every age group studied. So the real variation in the recommendation depends on a woman's risk for developing breast cancer at each age. Let's look at the numbers. From age 35 to 39, which is an age group where no organization recommends screening, about 60 women per 100,000 women will develop breast cancer. At age 40 to 44, the risk goes up to 120 women per 100,000, and that's why we believe 40 is the age where the discussion with a clinician should begin. And even though the likelihood of developing breast cancer is low, and most women will not develop breast cancer, some women, many women, will want to start screening during that age. But at age 45 to 49, the risk goes up to 190 women per 100,000. And that's why the guideline group recommends it's 45. where the benefit clearly outweighs the drawbacks of screening, and all women must begin screening at that age and continue regularly. Because look what happens when the risk peaks at age 70 to 74. At that age range, 430 women per 100,000 will develop breast cancer, and it really highlights the importance of women keeping up with regular screening as they get older. Now, a lot of people have asked, if the risk goes up, why can I get by with screening every other year? And that has much more to do with how rapidly breast cancer advances. Before menopause, cancers tend to be a bit more aggressive. They advance more rapidly, and that's why it's important to screen more frequently every year. After menopause, our new research shows us that breast cancer progresses more slowly, and we get almost all the benefit from screening every other year. Remember, though, the guideline does include the option for women 55 and older to continue to screen every year to get absolute maximum benefit from screening.
And I think it's interesting what he says at the end there. He says, you know, postmenopausal women can go every other year, but if you want the best possible screening, you need to do it yearly. It's funny because years ago they did an actual study to see what was the best interval for catching breast cancer. And it actually turned out to be 6 months. The problem is no insurance company or the government's going to pay for it. So yearly screening, I've seen far too many cases in my career where that interval cancer is fairly aggressive. And even in postmenopausal females, the amount of radiation you get from the new devices is like flying on an airplane from here to Orlando. And so the background radiation is greater than that. So if your insurance company is going to pay for it, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't want to do that because it is optimal. Now, can you maybe get away with going every other year postmenopausal? Yeah, until you're the one that shows up with the breast cancer. And I've seen far too many of those cases where they just kick themselves because the insurance right now has to pay for it anyway. It would be probably a different story if the insurance changes and they don't have to pay for screening studies, but at this point there's really no reason not to get it yearly. Radiation is not a reason, and it's still the most optimal way, the best way, and even this guy says that, and he's the head of the American Cancer Society, and he said, yeah, it's still better to do it every year, but if you want, you could maybe skip a year. Like I said, I've seen too many. So this is just a quick summary of all the different organizations and what they recommend, and I'll just sum it up. Note, everyone agrees mammography saves lives, and most recommend starting at age 40. Now I'm going to talk about breast density. What about breast density? You get these letters in the mail, and you have dense breasts or you don't have dense breasts. What do you do with that? And we'll get you a little bit of the history on this. But here you can see there's 4 different densities. On your left, that's fatty, then there's scattered, then there's heterogeneously dense, and then there's extremely dense. Why does it matter? Well, I think it was around 2012, there's this lady up in Connecticut, okay, and she ended up with a breast cancer, and this is her right here, Nancy M. Capello. Now, Nancy Capello had dense breast tissue. She went every year for her mammogram, didn't do anything supplemental, ended up with a stage 3 breast cancer, okay? She's, well, what did I do wrong? I've gone every year, I've done what I'm supposed to. Why did I get breast cancer, and why do I have stage 3 cancer with already metastasis to my lymph nodes in my armpit? Well, she said, what could we have done differently? She goes, well, you could have gotten ultrasound. Unfortunately, Nancy M. Capello passed away in 2018, but she's the reason why you all get a letter in the mail after your mammogram. She was so upset, she went to the legislatures of every state and got them to change the laws so that we at least had to inform women that they had dense breast tissue, and because they had dense breast tissue, number one, they were at increased risk of breast cancer, but it's worse. We can't see it mammographically. And that's what happened to her. And unfortunately, she passed away in 2018. Here's another lady that some of you know who happens to be my mother-in-law. She also had dense breast tissue. She was predominantly a vegan. She walked an hour every day. She never smoked. She never drank. She was at this church many times, including the time to see Courtney get baptized. And I believe it was Fred Myers who did her surgery. And she came up with stage 3 cancer. I looked at her mammograms. This was 18 years ago. There was no way that you could have seen the cancer on that mammogram. The doctors didn't fail her, the system did. And so she came here, she got most of her treatment here. Unfortunately, she passed away about a year and a half ago after a 17-year battle with breast cancer. So don't think you're out of the woods just because you're a vegan, you're an Adventist, and you don't eat meat, and you don't eat dairy, and you don't do all that stuff. She didn't either. She didn't smoke, she didn't drink, and she even exercised. And as you can see, she wasn't morbidly obese or had any problems like that, didn't have any other pre-existing. She still got breast cancer. Okay, and she got it pretty early because it was around age 60 when we found her cancer. She came to my house here in Greenville and told me Thanksgiving dinner that she had a lump under her arm. I immediately took her to the hospital over to Kohne, and we found the cancer. After that, we found Fred. Fred took care of her, and she fought the battle for a good 17 years, but she finally lost the battle. So breast density matters. I don't want to see any family to have to go through what our family went through. Watching your loved one pass away from this disease is not fun, okay? And watching my wife and her siblings, those dying moments for Mom, it was not pleasant. You can avoid this, okay? And that's why breast density is so important to me, and that's why it's personal to me. That's why I'm here tonight. It's not a job for me, it's personal. We as a family have felt the pain of this disease, and I'll do everything I can to help stamp that out. So these were the breast density laws until recently. Thank goodness the federal government finally did something. They passed a universal breast density law so that everyone all across the country has to be notified that they have dense breast tissue, okay? So most of the time, Tennessee at least tells you you have dense breast tissue and that you're at increased risk for breast cancer. What they don't tell you is what to do about it. Now in Connecticut, where Dr. Capello actually passed away, they tell you what to do about it and they pay for the ultrasound. Tennessee didn't go that far. So a letter tells you, again, you're at greater risk, but it doesn't tell you what to do, okay? And we'll show you. So here's your density risk. The sad part is we've known about this since 1995, okay? Boyd et al. Did that. It was published in 2008, and you can see the different densities here. The black bar goes up with density. Your risk can be up to 5 times greater than your cohort. So someone who has fatty breast tissue versus someone who has dense breast tissue, if you've got dense breast tissue, your risk went up 5 times. Family history doesn't even do that, okay? BRCA does, but family history does not. This, we're finding out, is the greatest risk factor to getting breast cancer outside of a genetic mutation, okay? So why? Women with greater than 50% dense tissue are 3 to 5 times greater for risk of breast cancer when the density is less than 25%. This is partially due to sensitivity with increased density and masking. So if you look all the way to the right, cancer is white, fibrous tissue is white, okay? You can't see it. The other thing is due to biological dense tissue, which is rich in epithelial stroma. What that really means is if you look on the one all the way to the left, that's fat. Fat never turns into breast cancer. If you look at the image all the way to the right, that's dense breast tissue. That's all breast tissue that could turn into cancer. And so obviously, if you have more of that tissue, your risk goes up. But it's a double whammy. Because literally when the tissue is that dense and the dense tissue is white and the cancers are white, you're literally looking for a polar bear in a snowstorm. And that's what happened to Mom. We didn't see the polar bear. It was a snowstorm. And she ended up passing away because of it. If she had ultrasound at that time, we would have found it. She wasn't here. She was down in Georgia where it all happened, and no one ever took that next step, which wasn't unusual for that time period, okay? But that's what you're looking for. You're looking for a polar bear in a snowstorm, and I don't care how good a radiologist you are, you can't see it. You have to supplement. You have to do something else. So here's a chart of breast cancers and the risk involved with density. So blue is fat, scattered is red, green is heterogeneous, and extremely dense is purple. Notice as the age groups go from 40 to 49, no matter what, breast density always is a significant risk factor. I don't care what age group you are. But if you go to age 70 to 74, look at the difference. If you have dense breast tissue, you're at significant risk of getting breast cancer, okay? Typically, as one gets older, the breast density decreases, but not always. And so it's important for you to read that letter that we send you. If you've got dense breast tissue, you need to do something about it. Okay, so it really kind of works out much like leaves on a tree. So you can see the first young lady here is in her 40s, okay? She's got really dense breast tissue, and we're trying to look for that little squirrel hiding in those leaves. You can't see it. Even in the summertime of your life, when you hit the 50s, okay, you can see that a few storms come by, blow a branch or leaf or two away, you still can't really see that little squirrel. Once you hit the 60s, or the fall of your life, mammographically, you can see that even a few clusters of pretty red leaves could hide a cancer or two. Typically, by the time you hit your 70s and 80s, which is the winter of your mammographic life, things just pop out at you. The cancers just jump out at you. Because the background tissue is black, the cancers are white, boom, there you go, you can see that squirrel. The problem really is if you are 70 and you have dense breast tissue, okay? Because now I call these women palm trees. They don't lose their leaves, okay? And that's when you have a problem. We can't see the cancer. So again, the risk factors, being a woman, getting older, having dense breast tissue. So one of my favorite patients was here in Greenville. She was like 94 years old and she was still a courier. She had dense breast tissue like this. She worried me to death. She was so sweet. Luckily she never got it while I was around, but anyway, it's people like that I really worry about because they are at extreme risk if you have dense breast tissue and that continues to go all the way through your life. Number one, we can't detect it. Number two, you're at greater risk. Okay, so if you're old and you have dense breast tissue or older, 60s and 70s and 80s, it's like a lottery ticket. It's a lottery you don't want to win. So if you look at all that white tissue again, that white tissue is breast parenchyma. That's what can turn into cancer. Those are your lottery tickets. The dark stuff is the fat. The fat never turns into breast cancer because it's fat, okay? So this is a lottery you do not want to win, okay? But also, just because you have lots of tickets doesn't mean you will win that lottery. So just because you have dense breast tissue doesn't guarantee that you're going to get breast cancer. It just increases your risk. By how much? 5 times. That's significant. So if you got 1 in 8, which is on average, do the math. 1 in 2, 1 in 3, numbers don't look good. So if you're older and you get a letter that says dense breast tissue, okay, anywhere in, late 50s, 60s, 70s, you need to get supplemental screening because we can't see it. So what can you do about it? Breast ultrasound's one option. There's a new technology that I mentioned early on called ABUS, automated breast ultrasound. 3D mammography, which does help, but not completely, and MRI, which is expensive and has other issues with it. But it's probably the best way of finding these things. So we're going to start with digital breast tomosynthesis, which is 3D mammography. We've had it in Greenville for years now. Matter of fact, we were the first in the region to get it at Tacoma. I was very proud of that. And this really does help. So how does it help us? It decreases the effect of tissue superimposition, okay? It improves lesion conspicuity, which means we can see it better. You can characterize lesions better. So it improves scientifically what we call specificity and sensitivity. More importantly, it reduces callbacks, okay? So here's a case that we had, and you can see that on the left-hand side is a regular 2D mammogram. On the right-hand side is a 3D mammogram. And I'm just going to run it through. And with the 3D, it allows us to slice through the tissue millimeter by millimeter so that we can see the lesion, okay? So if you look at the 2D on the left and the 3D on the right, you can see that there's a mass hiding behind that pectoralis muscle. You tell me that you can see that on that first image. There's no way. Worse yet, this mass is right up against the chest wall. Once it invades the chest wall, you can ask Fred Myers, how easy is it to resect a cancer that's in the chest wall, Fred? Not easy, okay? Frequently impossible. So this patient, had she not come back, or had come back in 2 years, and it invaded the chest wall, it now becomes a non-surgical lesion. Okay, that leaves you with chemo, radiation, and other, not so fun things to do. So that's why the importance is to catch these things early, because they can cause additional damage. But the tomosynthesis clearly sees that you have a mass back there, and it takes away that superimposition of that muscle and or other tissues. So there's the cancer. You can see it quite nicely. Now, that's decreasing superimposition because we could see through the muscle because of 3D. But it does more. Okay, it improves lesion conspicuity, so we can see it better. It gets rid of the overlapping tissue, but it gets better than that. That increases sensitivity. But it actually characterizes the lesion. If you look at that little mass there, you can see it's got little arms on it. We call this a spiculated mass. This is a cancer. If it was round and smooth, less likely to be a cancer, but they can be. But this is clearly a cancer. You know what you're dealing with here. So that also gives you better specificity, okay? And that reduces our callbacks as well because we know what we're dealing with. So here's a case actually from Tacoma a couple of years ago. This was a lady who was from Knoxville area, and she got her mammogram, and you can see that in the posterior aspect of the breast, there's a mass. The problem was they didn't have 3D, and they didn't know what to do with it, and they couldn't get her in for 2 or 3 weeks, which used to be the problem around here. We're fixing that. So here's this mass. She's been worrying now for 3 weeks. They sent her to us at Tacoma, okay? So we did a 3D mammogram on her, okay? And you can see the mass right there. And with this mass, you can see that inside it looks kind of like a donut, right? That means it's a lymph node. That's a fatty central hilum. She never needed to be called back in the first place. She worried for 3 weeks, phoned all over the place. We got her in, did the 3D. Had she come to Tacoma in the first place, or where 3D was available and gotten a 3D mammogram, she would have never worried for 3 weeks. This poor lady didn't sleep for 3 weeks because she didn't get a 3D mammogram. In my practice, she would have never gotten a letter to come back. She was good for a year because this is clearly a lymph node. That's the power of 3D mammography, okay? And so that was our case from a few years ago. Okay, let's go through it again. So there you can see again the fatty central hilum. So it's a lymph node. Dose. Everyone comes to me and says, oh, I'm getting radiated, I'm getting radiated. You're getting radiated everywhere you go. Wait till 5G hits you. Again, we now have the lowest dose ever that we've ever seen in mammography. We used to remember those old film screen ones where they used to hang the films and stuff like that. You still see it in TV shows or movies, but you don't see it in radiologist departments anymore. The radiation really is low, and what we're doing now is what we call synthetic 2D. So in essence, the machine actually takes a 3D image and the computer builds the 2D image. When 3D originally came out, it actually would do a 3D mammogram, and then they do at the same time a 2D mammogram. You get double the radiation dose. That's not the case anymore. Almost everyone uses the synthetic capabilities now. And so what it does is it takes all those slices and it rebuilds the 2D mammogram. Why is that important? Because the 2D mammogram shows us the forest, and the tomographic or 3D images show us the trees. So we get the forest and the trees, one shot, we're done. Okay, now with curved paddles, doesn't even have to hurt anymore. Awesome, all right? So how much better is 3D mammography than regular 2D? And there are places in town where you go get your mammogram, you could still get a 2D mammogram. Refuse it, insist on 3D, okay? You don't want a 2D mammogram, you want to get a 3D. Rose et al. In 2013 did a multi-center analysis to see how much better it was. 37% reduction in callback. How many here have had a mammogram and gotten called back? Yeah. Okay. Well, we can reduce that callback a lot. Did it give you anxiety? Were you anxious when you got the letter or the phone call? Most women are. Okay. You want to wait 3 weeks to find out the answer? Not me. So it has a 35% increase in detection of all kinds of breast cancer. Okay. 54% increase in invasive ductal carcinoma, which is the most common cancer. That's the most common killer, IDC. And it can catch it up to 54%. Okay? 115% increase in the positive predictive value. Again, I showed you that spiculated mass. We know it's a cancer. It's spiculated, it's back there, it's dense, there's a lot of characteristics the 3D allowed us to see. Had you gotten a 2D, you'd be coming back, let's say you're postmenopausal, in 2 years, that mass would have already grown into the chest wall. Now you got real trouble on your hands. You don't want to deal with that, okay? So how does this compare with 2D, ultrasound, and MRI? These are the numbers. So sensitivity for catching a cancer. MRI is the best, 92.5%. The problem is you got to go in this donut, you hear a lot of noise, it's a long exam, it costs $3,000 to $6,000. Are you going to pay that copay? Not me. Even though it's the best, it's still too expensive. There's not a cheap way of doing that yet. And you get contrast material and dye. Ultrasound is surprisingly actually number 2 at 79%. Okay? DBT is close at 75%. 2D mammography is only 59%. So you can see that just going from 2D to 3D, you have a 15% better chance of finding a breast cancer no matter what your breast density is. Okay? And now with synthetic 2D, there's no additional radiation. So it's the same radiation dose you always get, okay? But it's kind of like getting a screening and a diagnostic mammogram for the same price. So I remember a few years ago, my sister called me and she goes, Raymond, should I get the 3D? They want $80. I said, get it. It was the first time in 5 years she didn't get called back for a $300 ultrasound. Was it worth the $80? Peace of mind, answered her question, didn't have to go back. So now we have a new technology called automated breast ultrasound. I really like this technology because it solves a lot of problems that we had with ultrasound screening. And I'll go over those quickly. So here is a dense breast, okay? Dense breast tissue. This is a case from 2 weeks ago. Went across my computer 2 weeks ago. So we recommended to do an ultrasound, okay? Do you see anything in this breast? I didn't. That's what's inside there. Okay? There's a mass in that breast, and you cannot see it. I don't care how good you are, you can't see it on the mammogram. And that's why if you've got dense breast tissue, you have to ask your doctor for supplemental screening. We cannot see the cancers. I don't care how good you are. And this is my case from literally 2 weeks ago. Okay? Just came in, we did the ultrasound, boom, there it was. Oops. Let's say she was postmenopausal and she went for 2 years. How big do you think that thing's going to be in 2 years? So what does ABUS do for us, automated breast ultrasound? We can see through the dense breast tissue like I showed you, the dense breast with that mass that was in there, there's no way you can see it. So that's like regular ultrasound. It's faster. If you do a regular mammogram, it takes about an hour for handheld, and that ties up a lot of time, and that's why a lot of people don't want to do it. A lot of radiology departments refuse to do screening breast ultrasound even though they know it works, because they don't have the time. But this machine does it in 30 minutes. Or faster. It's reproducible because the machine is doing it. They take this large paddle, they put it on your breast in 3 places, you're done one side, it goes to the other side. So all the technologist has to do is just basically put it on your breast. The machine does the rest. If you're doing handheld with a technologist, this is the problem. Some technologists, ultrasound is probably the hardest modality out there of all imaging for the technologist because they can actually create masses that don't exist, and you don't want that to happen. And so to get a really good breast sonographer is hard. I've worked with probably 50 sonographers in my career. I would trust only 3 of those 50 to actually do handheld breast ultrasound and be able to find the small cancers. They can't do it. So this machine helps with that and helps keep things stabilized. Because some girls have 2 years experience, others have 20 years experience. Some kids get 6 weeks of ultrasound training and they hire them. Others have a 1-year course. And so there's such a variance in ultrasound technologists, and this is the hardest modality. That's why it's always been a problem, and that's why a lot of the studies never really supported breast ultrasound because there was such a variance. This machine, which we have now up in Johnson City where I'm working, we got the first one in East Tennessee. So SOFA is the first to attain this technology in East Tennessee. I think it's going to help a lot of people, save a lot of lives, and we'll find those cancers that we just can't see on regular mammography. We can do it in a short time period, and it's reproducible. So we can follow things easier too, because it always knows where it was. It really reconstructs the breast in 3D, and we can just scroll through it and see what's going on. Really cool technology. Okay, and here's another case where you can see dense breast tissue. Can you find the lesions? That was a cancer, actually one right next to each other. You can see there's a spiculated mass and there's another mass next to it. So this lady actually has 2 cancers in that breast. You can't see them. You need to supplement it with ultrasound. There's just no 2 ways about it. Okay? So in summary, who should get a mammogram? All females 40 years of age and older. And then the question comes, when should you stop? And I like Duke University. I went to a course at Duke University once, and they basically said, if you've got 6 years or less to live, you really don't need to do mammograms, particularly at that age, because again, they're usually less aggressive. And so that's something to look at. If mom's 94 and she's, got Alzheimer's and she's in the nursing home, don't bother. It's not worth it. Don't bother, okay? But if mom's 94 and she's a courier driving around town delivering packages, yeah, absolutely, okay? And so you have to look at each individual case. If you think that patient has less than 6 years to live, you can stop screening mammography. But if you think that patient can still live beyond that, then you really need to continue with everything, because I've seen what it's like to die from this disease, okay? It's not pretty. You don't want to do it. There's better ways to go. Okay, so breast density, does it matter? Obviously, we've been over that ad nauseum here. Yes, particularly as you age. Remember that woman who's got dense breast tissue, who's in her 60s and 70s, 5 times the risk of breast cancer than her cohort. That's huge. That's really, really huge. Okay? 3D mammography, do I need it? Absolutely. It improves your chances of finding a cancer early, and more importantly, reduces your risk of being called back. Are there still callbacks with 3D? Sure there are, but they're significantly reduced. Again, because like that lymph node I showed you. I know it's a lymph node. You don't need to come back for that. You don't need to worry, and you don't need to get a letter. ABUS, finally, is a cost-effective solution for screening dense breasts. Thankfully, we just got one up at SOFA. Our imaging center is right across from Mahoney's. So if you want that, we can get you scheduled and taken care of that as well. So those are the things we want to talk about. That's what it looks like. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Are there any questions? Yeah, Harry.
So the breast density is a problem. Are there any solutions if a woman asks, can I do anything to have less dense breast?
So unfortunately, density is familial, and there really isn't much you can do other than stop hormonal replacement therapy. So if you're postmenopausal and you're on hormonal replacement therapy, that's like pouring gas on the fire, and so that's one way you can decrease it. If you just have that and that's your family history and that's the way you are, you really can't reduce that. I know with potassium iodine drops we can reduce fibrocystic changes, but we don't reduce density. We can actually reduce risk of cancer with that as well, but we can't reduce density. And so really there's nothing that I'm aware of that can reduce density other than time and stopping hormonal replacement therapy if you're on it. Yes?
If you're BRCA1, do you need the MRI or the new ultrasound?
Okay, so with BRCA1, I would go with the MRI because the MRI is still the most sensitive of detection, and your risk is significantly with BRCA. So in those cases, what I typically do, I'll do patients every 6 months. I'll do, let's say in June or January, we'll do MR, then in June we'll do 3D mammogram. You have to do, unfortunately, 2 things because microcalcifications are not seen on MR or on ultrasound, only on mammography. So you still have to get your mammogram. But if you're a BRCA, I would do MR. The problems with MR are if you are claustrophobic, if you have a pacemaker or other electronic stimulator where we can't put you in the magnet, and or if you have issues with your kidneys, because the contrast can damage your kidneys. And so, that's something you need to discuss with your doctor. But if you can tolerate the MR, that's the better way to go if you're a BRCA. I would do that if I was a BRCA.
Is it offered in your area?
We are, yeah, we're putting in the center right now. The MR got delivered, the CT got delivered today. We will have full capacity. Hopefully by October 5, we're going to do a soft open and we'll have MR capabilities, including MR biopsy capabilities.
Okay,
so if you can't tolerate the MR, definitely get an ultrasound.
Okay, thank you.
That's a good question. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you so much for your attention, and look forward to seeing you guys as patients if you want. We're ready and open. And it's a fun place. And the one thing I want to do as well, it's been a rough year with Tacoma being shut down and everything, and I think it affected all of us as physicians. But I want you to know that God is watching out for each and every one of us. and everything fell into place. This new center is state-of-the-art. When SOFA came and asked me to help them with this, they said, Ray, we want you to build the best imaging center money can buy. No holds barred. I didn't even have that with Adventist Health. I mean, I had it pretty good with Walcott and with Carlisle Alton, but nothing like this. And I want to give credit tonight to God, because God answered my prayers that I could come back to this area and answered my prayers. I pray with my patients before biopsies. I was in California for 3 months. I did about 200 procedures at an Adventist hospital, and only one person let me pray with them. One. And that included Adventist Health administrative people. And that patient happened to be a Catholic. It's terrifying what's going on out there. The evil that is going on in this world, you know, we know our redemption is nigh. And so I really just want to give God all the credit for this incredible imaging center that we can take care of our patients. And yeah, I still pray with my patients. And I've only had 2 or 3 people in the last year say no. The great majority here say yes. So it's a blessing to live in an area where there still is fear of the Lord. And really, truly a blessing. So that's it. I mean, God gets all the glory. Thanks you.
Thank you very much. That was very, very enlightening and interesting. Okay, so don't forget when you exit tonight to take extra postcards with you if you would like, so you can let your friends know about the next one in January. And because we're so few in number, if you would like to take 2 sack lunches home, you're welcome to do that, okay? Dr. Nelson, would you like to end our meeting tonight with prayer, please?
Bow our heads. Gracious Father, we thank you so much for the marvelous body that you have created for us. We thank you for the insights that medicine has been able to give in its care and its treatment. Thank you for Dr. Kohne's sharing of information in his specialty. Bless each one of us with a sense of stewardship, that we will care for our bodies as the gift they are from your hand. Thank you, and send us home tonight safely. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.